Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. In this week's episode, I welcome William Pullen. William is a psychotherapist based in London, England. He is an author, a TEDx speaker, and the founder of Dynamic Running Therapy. In this episode, William shares his journey of picking up running and why he believes in the power of running when it comes to therapy. William also shares the app he is hoping to release in the next few months. William and I also discuss the current challenges we are facing with the pandemic and some of the societal changes that we're experiencing and the impact that's having on our mental health and how running has been beneficial for both of us. I really hope you enjoy this episode, and if at the end you could leave a 5-star review, I would truly appreciate it. All right, William, thank you for joining the Easy Conversations podcast today. I'm super grateful for you to take the time and have this conversation with me. Before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and maybe get into a little bit of what it is that you do. And you're based in the UK, but where exactly in the UK, just for the listeners to get some insight.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on, Furkan. I'm in London. I'm a psychotherapist. Have been for about 15 years or something. I sort of my specialism is using running as a tool to sort of accelerate and get deep, which works particularly well with men. I know this is a men's podcast, but men, as you know, can find it hard to sit in front of another man or indeed another woman and open up and it's easier doing it side by side. I'll get into that deeper, but yeah, that's what I do in a nutshell.
And how were you able to build running into your form of therapy? Because it's not traditional, obviously, and it's not very common. So was it something that you had experienced yourself and you decided to try it with your clients?
Yeah, that's spot on. It's not that somebody else did it with me. What happened was I had this sort of meltdown when I was at about 40 or something, and I needed to do something to get out of the house and get up back in control of my life, and I knew exercise would be good for me, and so I took up therapy and I took up running, and I noticed when I was running with my friend how much easier it was to talk to him than it was to talk to my therapist, who was sitting across from me in a black suit looking rather, formal. And it just seemed to flow so easily. And so then I decided to train to become a psychotherapist. And then I thought, well, why not see if I can fuse the two together? Because I know how well this works. I started sort of doing it with friends. And anyway, I don't know about you. I don't know if you're a runner. You a runner?
Well, I'm aspiring to become one. I run 5-10 kilometers occasionally, but trying to do it more frequently. Okay. It's something I picked up. Actually, it's funny. It's something I picked up during COVID because when the gyms were closed, I needed some form of exercise and I started running. So I definitely see the therapeutic benefits behind running for sure.
And have you experienced that thing? I don't know if you run with friends, but if you do, have you experienced that thing where conversation seems to just flow quite easily and gets quite deep quite easily, or do you run alone?
So I run alone. I typically like to exercise alone. It's just my time away from everything. Right. So that's when I really process things and reflect. But I've heard stories where friends tell me, when they run together, they're able to have a lot of conversation, and it is beneficial in that sense too.
Yeah, well, I would say this to any of your listeners who maybe are going through a tough time at the moment. Nothing's better for the head than running, just like you're saying. It's great for the head, it's great for the body, but if you find a friend or you join a run club, you'll find a community there of people that are very happy to open up and talk, and it's just a fantastic way to spend a Friday night or something, or Monday morning, or whatever time you can do.
For sure. And have you looked up research or been involved in any research that shows how running can be therapeutic? Like, what's going on in our body that is so beneficial about running?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a book on the subject called Run for Your Life. In the States, it's called Running with Mindfulness, which goes into a little bit of the research. I didn't put too much in there, but yeah, such that there is research and there's growing bodies of research. There's plenty of research uh, around how it's good for mental health, just because, with the corresponding health that comes with the body. But in terms of the community-based thing and the going deep, not so much. There are reports that it works, but nobody's quite sure why. And my personal theory is just that, when we were hunter-gatherers, that's what we did for hundreds of thousands of years, is travel together in small groups telling stories to each other. So I think it's the oldest and most natural thing you can do.
And when you say like mental health, like how does running help with that? Like, if you don't mind sharing some tidbits there.
Well, I mean, for a start, it de-stresses you. It provides clarity, and just a sense of wellness. As you're connecting with the environment, you're connecting with your body, because quite a lot of rumination and anxiety happens in the head, and it's circular, and it's a way to get out of that. I could go on forever, but yeah, it hits just about every metric you can imagine.
And then in terms of your own therapeutic process, often what I find is not everyone likes to run, and there could be resistance. So when you encounter that, or have you encountered that, and what do you do?
Well, I don't, because people come to me and typically they're already runners, and if they're not, I tell them, look, you do not need to add on trying to become a runner onto this process. We can do walking therapy, but I think that if you try to go from zero to a runner, you're going to be so obsessed with just trying to get to the next tree, and it's going to be distracting. So typically, people that come to me already have a running practice.
Okay. And what would you suggest? Because I know for me personally, I get discouraged if I'm not running as fast as I would like. But I think personally, when I take a step back, I recognize that it's not about how fast I'm going. It's just about getting my body moving and getting that, endorphins going. So is that something you're encouraging people to just focus on, is just that movement piece?
Most definitely. A lot of people, certainly in London anyway, I get a lot of sort of journalists as clients, and people with busy lives that are really stressed. It's stress that tends to be my bread and butter for my running therapy. These are people who are striving, who are doing jobs for 3 people, and there's only one of them. So what I say to them is, look, what we're going to be doing is not striving at all. I do not want you to strive here, not to make this the best therapy session you've ever had. I don't want this to be the fastest therapy session you've ever had. I want you to listen to your body, listen to the pace, and it's completely client-led. So we're out here for 50 minutes. You decide, you want to spend the whole 50 minutes sitting down on the grass, or you want to spend the whole 50 minutes running, but don't confuse this with a training program. We're not here. The running is purely here to help with the therapy. It's not the other way around.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That makes sense. And I guess what I also noticed on your page is you have an app, the Dynamic Running app. Like, do you mind sharing a little bit what this app entails and what it's about?
Yeah, with pleasure. It has a lot of mindfulness stuff on there, so mindful walking, mindful running, some meditation, and then the real part of it, or perhaps the more important part of it, or the bit I'm more proud of, more interesting, is my own work. So it has 2 20-session programs, one for running with anxiety and one for running with depression. And you listen to those in whatever order seems right to you, whatever questions, whatever themes for the session feel like a good fit, and you do them as many times as you like. And when you listen to that session, I'm going to be talking about the subject of the day, stress and work, or stress, whatever it is. And I open it up, you listen to me, but then I ask questions, specific questions, typically about 7 a session. And then you can either press record on the phone. There's a big microphone icon on the front of your phone. And you record an answer. And and then you tap it again and I carry on talking. And then the idea is for you to take those answers and put them in a diary and it's about increasing awareness, about triggering awareness of your process, discovering what you're doing that could be better, understanding where stuff maybe originated from, looking at your expectations you put on yourself, looking at the scars and the traumas that are perhaps causing the stress, looking at your relationship, your work. We explore everything. And at the end, I ask you to do what's called a final synopsis, which is a moment for you to reflect on your running journey that you've had with me, and what you've learned and what you haven't. It's of course not the same as sitting down with a therapist, but I think it has great value, and it's something you can do without a therapist. You can do it by yourself. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than being with a therapist. And so yeah, I think that's why I think it works well.
Yeah, and I think I mean, one of the things you touched on there, it is important. I think the goal of therapy eventually is to get the client to be independent and be able to deal with a lot of these things themselves once they've learned how to break the cycle.
Yeah.
And I guess for listeners, with depression and maybe a little bit with anxiety, people are able to maintain that cycle of the depressive cycle. And what running, or what you're describing in the app, allows them to do is activate a positive behavior that's breaking that cycle. And I think with anxiety, it's breaking that rumination that you're sitting there and thinking of negative thoughts. So I think that's
exactly it.
Yeah.
Yes, and as you say, with depression particularly, that comes typically with feelings of futility and powerlessness. And there's nothing more empowering than running around a park. And you may not be a great runner, in which case maybe you'll only do 100 meters on the first day. I only want you to increase as slowly as you can or as fast as you want to. There's no pressure, but those small incremental moments of victory, where you've managed to pull yourself out of bed, which of course is the hardest thing when you're depressed.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do, each one is a moment of empowerment, and that's what you need. It's when you're depressed, it's that one shard of light that comes in through an otherwise completely black room that you're in. If I could wheel back to my app, though, at the moment, if I don't know when this podcast will go out, but at the moment the app is not up. I'm quite excited because I'm completely redesigning it and putting in a mood diary, and I'm putting in a running map as well, so people be able to see what they've run, how far they ran, and indeed what session they did during that run, and what notes they made during that session. So it's gone from sort of 1.0 to 8.0.
No, that's great. And when do you expect it to come out?
That's a good question. I would hope in the next 3 to 6 months. Sounds like quite a long time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, it takes time.
I wish it was faster. It does take time. Yeah. It takes time to get it right, and I'm not an app developer. And I made some mistakes the first time round, and I'm learning, and I'm trying not to make those mistakes again. So I'm taking my time. I've also been very ambitious, as I've just described, with what I'm trying to get in on this thing. And apps, there's so much to know about onboarding and about the user journey and all the rest of it. Yeah, I'm learning.
Yeah, no, and it's important, like you said, to get it right, because otherwise it loses the value that you're trying to give to the user.
So, well, you're an engineer, right? So you understand that better than anybody. If you get the engineering wrong, you've got the building falls down, everybody dies.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case with engineering. Yeah. No, and William, I appreciate everything you've shared up to this point. One of the things you mentioned earlier, and maybe we can shift the conversation a little bit here, around telling stories and the value you were suggesting around even running within a community. I think if you were to expand that a little bit, just being part of a community is huge, especially with some of the challenges we're encountering right now with the pandemic, or just mental health in general. And there's a huge value in because for hundreds and hundreds of years we've been telling stories, and those stories have evolved but they almost have the same kind of gist to them. So why do you think that's important? Because I have my own opinion on it, but I just want to hear yours first.
Okay, so mine is that I think that we're seeing a breakdown in communities, breakdown in relationships, some of that social media, some of it's the speed of society, maybe some of it's the death of God, or Nietzschean death of God in 19, whatever you want to call it. But I saw a stat the other day that was shocking. It said something like 1 in 3 American men, if you ask them, they will tell you they do not have one close friend. And that's much more with men than it is with women. So for some reason, men increasingly are not feeling like they're part of communities, not even small little ones. I don't know, is everybody moving? Do you grow up with your friends and then you move, or maybe you try to hold on to them? Maybe you talk to them too much online, and in the end, the whole thing just falls apart. I don't know what it's about, but I know that we're social creatures, and without that socialization, we end up anxious and despairing.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, running is a fantastic way. It literally, you could join, any of your listeners could join a running group tomorrow, and they would have a brand new family available to them right there. But tell me your theory.
So I mean, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but what I'm seeing here is also a lot of the relationships men are having are very superficial. And I don't mean to be judgmental when I say that. What I'm saying is men struggle to have the deeper conversations. Like I find like a lot of men even struggle to have a conversation like you and I are having. And that's what I'm seeing. So what that prevents is you're not getting into a deeper level of emotions or struggles or challenges you may have. You're either talking about sports or politics, but you're not going any deeper than that. And one of the things I've done recently is I started a men's group where we have those conversations about what we're experiencing and the challenges we're having. And I've had a couple of friends come in and share stories that I've never knew. I mean, I've known these people for years. Really? And they start sharing, some of the challenges they have with their parents or their family. And you get to understand what challenges they're facing, and you want to help them. But I think what we do in that men's group is we go around and we try to help each other out and share our own experiences, and that's powerful. But going back to where the struggle comes from is a lot of men don't have that avenue or community to be able to talk about it, or they're scared or worried about having those conversations with their friends for fear of judgment.
And we live in a very judgy age, don't we? Where so we're all policing ourselves internally and worried about what we say. Do I sound crazy? Do I sound cruel? Do I sound like a liability? So that's a lot of pressure. But I think a big part of it is, I think the men have been sitting around since the beginning of time, having somewhat superficial chats, and I think men can still feel a great brotherhood even with superficial chats. The problem is today is as much, I think, to do with distraction and types of, and technology, where you're having these chats and you meet up with a friend 30 years ago before mobile phones. Your friend was sitting there. He had your attention fully. You had his. There was no way your mind wasn't on anything else. There was nowhere else for it to go. So you may have just talked about football or about hunting or whatever it was. But in that moment, it felt like somebody was really there. Now our minds are in 8 different places at the same time. And we're not connecting as deeply, I think. So I think it's a mixture of the technology, the age, and, as you said, superficiality.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the technology is a huge challenge. To your point, we're thinking about so many different things. It's like, oh, I need to respond to this email. I need to go on my social media account. I need to do this. And it's hard to stay focused. I was actually having a conversation with a friend, and, I think, like, as we've evolved as the human species, so have our temptations, right? So, and it's social media, our cell phones, they're all temptations that have evolved just like we've evolved as a species. And We just
Well, we also, Falcon, we live in a permissive age, right, where it's now acceptable to date 18 people at the same time and do drugs and sleep with your neighbor's wife. You can do anything you want. So the boundaries, we're not boundaried the way we used to be, right? You were used to be what the church would hold you in, the community, your neighbors. Now it's like, well, forget about my neighbor. And he's a bigger freak as I am. Everybody's a freak. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
So there's nothing containing you. There's no societal norms. There are no standards. It's an exciting age, and it's wonderful in many respects, but it's hard to manage. And if you're not careful, you end up down a rabbit hole, doing stuff that you never thought you'd do, losing friends. You start off smoking a bit of weed, next thing you're on cocaine. Classically, with cocaine, suddenly all your old friends are gone. You've only got cocaine friends who, like you, are all a bunch of insecure nuts. And now you've lost all your friends, and suddenly, you're in trouble. And it happens just like that, because we all think it's okay to do whatever we want now.
Yeah. So what do you suggest in those? Obviously, we agree that this is a huge challenge, and I know we're kind of deviating from the running aspect of it, but what do men do in this age? I mean, again, I have some ideas, but want to get your thoughts first.
Well, I think part of being a man, or any human, but perhaps particularly with the male libido being what it is, and male greed and expectations around success and excellence, there's so much pressure there pulling you all the time, one way or another. You have to master that. You have to master your own masculinity. And you have to not give in to every temptation that's available and just think that that's okay. And two, you have to work out what's going to be good for you. And maybe it means you've got to put your head down for 4 years and do a degree and stick with it, and that might mean giving up some stuff, You've got to have discipline. And I think that's, you can't just keep on looking to the nanny state to go, oh, look, you're going to be fine. And then you look on Instagram, everybody else seems to be fine. Of course, they're not really fine, but it keeps on reinforcing this idea that there's some inadequacy deep within you. I think we're just not as disciplined as we once were. And I think about my parents, my grandparents. These were people who, back, everybody thinks life was so easy back then. But, when you went to work, you took a packaged sandwich with you so that you could save enough money to put a deposit on your house. And it took 5 years. It still takes 5 years. It can still take 5 years, whatever background you're from. There's a house you can afford. But guess what? That's the end of your coffees. There's no more $5 coffees every day. There's no more $5, $10 lunches every day. All of that has to go. And if you're not ready to do that, if you're not ready to self-discipline, then you're going to fall behind.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there is an aspect of discipline. I think there's also, in fact, I did a video recently on instant gratification and discipline, and how can you find that balance, because it is a fine line. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the immediate payoff, because I think there's, in their mindset, it's, well, why would I wait 5-10 years to maybe get something when I can get it today, right? So it's finding that balance. The other piece is just being honest with ourselves and other people around us, and I know this is easier said than done, but to your point earlier, it is the insecurities that we're trying to disguise, and we will go to such great lengths to disguise those insecurities that it's almost, we're harming ourselves, of all people. So I think there's an aspect of that men need to get comfortable with, is we're all insecure in our ways. Where do those insecurities come from, and how can we manage those in our lives?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it sounds like a harsh thing to say, but a lot of it's about growing up, a lot of it's about learning to manage, as I said, insecurities and doing the right things. And it comes at a cost, and it calls for stamina. But if you do it, your life changes quickly. If you keep on flapping about, and of course we live in a society now where the algorithms have worked out how to keep us flapping all day long, triggering you. Triggering that dopamine loop all day long, and people just can't even tell which way is up anymore. And I think that's particularly tricky for men, because we are so easily triggered. You walk past a a piece of advertising. There's a beautiful woman there in a bikini selling you a Volvo or something, and your whole mind suddenly you're looking at her, and you're like, hang on, I was thinking about my work 2 minutes ago, and then there's another thing over here, and so there's just so much. There's so much stuff coming at us, so many different colors. It's coming so fast. They're overloading us on purpose so that we become dumb consumers, and it works.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, I think the temptation is the biggest piece that has evolved as well. And I think this discussion definitely goes well into the running aspect of it. To bring it back, I think for me, there is an aspect of discipline required. Personally, like I've never been a runner. I've played high intensity sports, but it was like short bursts. And for me, running required more endurance and discipline personally in what I was eating, the things I was doing to my body. And I think that's helped me tons, because not only am I disciplined, when I do go for a run, I'm able to like just focus and reflect. And that's why I like to do it alone, because it allows me to reflect on many, many things. And at the end of the run, I feel great. And there's nothing that I can do in the short term, like a form of instant gratification, that's going to give me the same feeling that I get from running.
Yeah, no, agreed. You feel sad, you feel pride. It's something you can go and do for free, easily, build up at your own pace. And for any of your listeners who don't have a running practice but find themselves interested, they could listen to my TEDx talk called Movement as Medicine. In there, I talk about the value of incremental change a lot. And there's a great app called Couch to 5K. There are various. The thing about running is, when I took it up, in that period during my meltdown, I had just about every bad habit you can imagine. I won't name them all, but trust me, I was no elite athlete. I could barely get to the next tree, but I started off slowly. I knew enough by that point. I'd worked out one of life's hacks, which was, start things slowly and keep your expectations low, and then at some point it'll click. Well, in running, it clicks so surprisingly fast. You go out there for your first run, overweight, exhausted, whatever you are, you set yourself a target to get to that tree over there. It's 50 meters away. The next time you go out, maybe it's the next tree. So you made it to 75 or 100 meters. That first 2 or 3 times may be tricky, but suddenly around the third time, and the first run only took you 1 minute. So we weren't talking about a massive investment here of sort of 5 minutes of running. Yeah. But that third time, suddenly you go, hang on a second, I've got something happening here. Part of it will be an emotional response. Part of it will be excitement. It'll be liberation. It'll be confronting the self, employing the self, disciplining the self. And suddenly you go, well, I've just made it. I've leapt from 100 meters to 400 meters. How did that happen? So give it a go is what I would say to anybody who doesn't have that practice.
Yeah. And it's fascinating how resilient our bodies are, that you can build yourself up so quickly. Just to your point, just slowly building yourself up. And all of a sudden now, like for me too, like I would have never imagined running 10 kilometers, but, over time, I was able to push myself and just got faster and I was able to get there. So I think there's tons of value there.
Yeah. I mean, going to that point. So as I said, I had all these bad habits, including smoking, nearly a packet a day, late nights, poker, drink, you name it. And I started up running, and within a year I'd done a marathon. And if you told me that I would ever run a marathon, I didn't think I'd make it 100 meters, that I would make it a marathon, I would have told you were out of your mind. But it happens, right? The golden rule of life is keep on putting one foot forward and the other in front of the other. What they don't tell you is that by the time you've put the sixth one just follows automatically.
Yeah.
People just think, well, the first one's so tough. How am I going to get to the second one? It's like, just don't worry about that. Just get going and it'll take care of itself. And before you know what's what, you're a NASA astronaut.
Yeah. So I mean, that's interesting. So I guess you mentioned, you had the meltdown, you had bad habits. So what was it about running that inspired you? Why running of all things? And,
Because it was so easy. I knew I needed to get out. I knew fresh air would be good. I certainly didn't want to be in an office. I needed to be out. It's so readily available. The barriers to entry were very low.
mhm,
I was in total control. I knew the sunlight would be good on my skin and the vitamin D and all that good stuff. It's just very doable. And I knew that, I had memories of being a kid. I used to play rugby when I was a kid, and I knew that sometimes when you're in your body, particularly as I think, perhaps particularly as a man, we need to be doing things with our bodies. Certainly, if we're anxious, it's a great way out is to pick up an axe or just do something with your body,
mhm,
because there's a lot of testosterone and aggression, and if we're not channeling that, it bounces back inside and it finds places. As they say, the devil makes use of idle hands. Well, the devil starts taking care of us, and now we're in trouble.
mhm. Yeah, no, I agree full-heartedly. And I know you mentioned just going back to like the community piece of running and the stories. What's your kind of perception on how our storytelling ability has evolved, or has it changed?
Well, I think it's become a sort of meta storytelling, right? It's a popular culture, the Kardashians and whatever else. Instead of us having a personal sense of personal hero's journey, we're sort of outsourcing it and just expecting it to happen for us. If I listen to enough success podcasts, or follow the Kardashians or enough, somehow I'll become a celebrity or whatever. Well, yeah, you can learn a lot from podcasts, but you're still going to need to go out there and do the work. So I think that somehow the kind of sense of agency, of being your own hero, has kind of, it's just, the sense of self has broken down, I think, a
Hmm.
lot. I
Hmm.
can't, where do I end? Who am I next to you? Why am I always comparing myself to you? What should it matter to me who you are? Why am I so concerned? If I could just keep the focus on myself and keep pushing myself forward, but my attention is taken away. I'm being asked to compare myself all the time to other people, and I'm always coming up short, and that's undermining me. So I think somehow the personal story has degenerated, and this kind of meta story, which is just a bunch of uh, billionaire Silicon Valley guys making a lot of money,
Yeah.
uh, you know, and you're on a spinning wheel like some cracked up mouse that doesn't know when to get off the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think, and this is why I enjoy it. So I have an 8-year-old. I enjoy watching like Disney movies or whatever, because to your point, they have that personal hero story to them, right? There's the
Yeah.
adversity. They have to go do the inner work, face their inner demons, and then they're able to like get to that next level of success.
Well, I'm such a huge believer in the sort of heroic struggle, and Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that life is challenging for everybody, and whether you don't have to use heroic terminology necessarily, but you are going to face many struggles in your life. As therapists, we often talk about the average person having 3 breakdowns. Of course, that's not a fact, but
Mhm.
you will have 3 or 4 or 2, but you're definitely not getting 0 crises in your life. Maybe your wife leaves you, maybe your company goes under, maybe your best friend steals your money. There's going to be a moment,
Mhm.
and those moments and what you do with them and what you learn and how you turn disappointment around and what you learn from regret, um, that's what's going to make you.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, and that's why I appreciate some of the readings of the Stoics. Just going through those, and Viktor Frankl is a huge inspiration for me. Is just finding that meaning in your struggle and your whatever adversity you're going through in life.
Why do you think that why do you think we've lost the sense of value or meaning in our own heroic struggle? Why does it somehow not matter to us?
I think there's a sense of entitlement. There's this expectation that there should be no adversity.
Yeah.
And for I don't know, whatever reason, I was fortunate because my parents immigrated to Canada, and they taught me, what it means to struggle, and working hard, because they had to do it, and I got to see it. Uh, Especially, I was the eldest child, so I got to see more of it,
Right.
more so than my siblings. So I think, what I see is, there is a sense of entitlement that, and I see a lot of people don't know what to do when the first sign of adversity comes into their life,
Yeah.
and they lose all meaning, and they're just so consumed in it that they can't even see, okay, if I can maybe even push this out a few months, I'm going to be better for it. So that's kind of my perception on where that whole story of struggle has been lost, because people believe they shouldn't struggle.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of advantages to being part of an immigrant family. Like you said, the hustle, you learn hustle, you watch hustle happening.
Yeah.
If you grow up with privilege or entitlement, you don't see that, you don't get it, you don't value it. Um, yeah, I was reading some statistics, I don't know if they're true or not, or listening to some the other day. It said that to be the child of immigrants like you is a fantastic thing, but that your kids, it'll happen as quickly as your kids, they will have already lost it.
Yeah. No, I see that with my son actually. As we were talking, I see that quite a bit, where, the slightest bit of adversity, or even me just challenging him on things, he gets very upset, and disappointed. And I'm like, well, or it's even playing video games, right? If he loses, he'll just shut it off. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, you can't do that. You need to figure out how you're going to master this, and push forward, right? So you're right there. It does lose its charm right away for the next generation. But I think, yeah, going back to your question, it is that sense of entitlement that's been the biggest challenge from my view.
So I don't have kids. I'm hoping to soon. I've always worried about, my father was a very strict disciplinarian. I've always worried about how I'll be as a father. Will I be too tough or not tough enough? I know that you definitely need to be tough. You definitely need to be tough. You need to push them. You need to have strong
Yeah.
boundaries. You need to not be scared to upset them and all these sorts of things. And I think today my sense is that, looking around at my friends and their kids, they're like best friends with their kids, and the kids call them by their first name. And I'm not sure that that's helping in the long run, their sort of mental health. I think you need strong boundaries. You need to push your son and daughter, and you need to,
Yeah.
you're there to teach them stuff. You're not there to be their buddy.
Yeah, I think there's a good balance. Like, I try to treat my son as a friend. Like, and the reason why I say having that friendship aspect is important, because you want them to be able to express themselves and open up. And, if there's anything that's bothering him, or if he's feeling emotion, I want him to express that to me. Whereas I didn't have that
Yeah.
type of relationship with my parents. But going back to your point, I also maintain boundaries. So when he tries to push things, or if he gets disrespectful, then I have to call him out on it and be like, hey, I
Definitely.
know I know we've got a very friendly relationship, but at the end of the day, I'm still your father. So let's not forget that.
Yes, and also I don't want to hear about every single emotional issue you've had. One day you're going to be out there, nobody's going to you're not going to have an opportunity to share with. I'm not going to be around forever.
Mhm.
You need to work out for yourself how to overcome at times. I'm going to be there for you as best I can and show you some, but sometimes I'm not, and I'm not
Mhm.
going to be there on purpose. Today, you're going to sit in this room by yourself, and you're going to deal for a few hours with the feelings that you're feeling right now. And guess what? I'll give you a hug afterwards, and you'll see everything will be fine.
Yeah.
But you need to master some of the fear that's inside of you, some of the anxiety that's inside of you. It's okay. So it's normalizing it. But I also think there's a danger today where kids are getting this message all day long. Oh, let's share, let's talk about every single problem we've got. And then the solution they share, but no solution. It's not really working for them. And what they're really not doing is learning how to separate out what I should be managing for myself, and what needs to be shared, or what has value in sharing with somebody else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you want to empower them to be able to figure things out, for sure. I mean, that's the this week my focus was on parenting and fatherhood, even on my social media accounts and stuff. But I think it's just one of those things. It's probably the hardest job you'll ever have as being a parent, because there's no right way of doing it. And even till today, I'm still figuring it out. And there's certain things I fail at miserably, and I just have to try again. But to your point, you have to have that form of discipline, because you're trying to set them up to be able to go out into this world and face all those challenges that are out there. So while trying to maintain some compassion and giving them that freedom to be able to express their emotions, which is something I didn't have.
Let me ask you this. So let's say you had got that, or your son gets that. Now he's married, he's dating this wonderful woman. Maybe he's dated a few women. And he's getting this message that I'm interested to know whether this is something that comes up in your podcast and what guys say. And he's getting this message that he should tell his girlfriend about what he's feeling and his insecurities and so forth. Do the people that you talk to and listen to, do they describe success with that, or do they sometimes say, oh, well, I feel like it's not just my perception that I'm losing whatever place or authority I've got as a man or as a human. I'm making myself too vulnerable, I guess, is my question. Did they say, oh, no, this is fantastic, it works so well, my girlfriend just treats me better? Or do they say, sometimes, I don't know?
Well, I think it's one of those things. There's not really a right answer to that either. I've heard both extremes. And in my personal opinion, what it comes down to is it really depends on your partner. So if you're a male and you've got a female partner and you're expressing your insecurities, if she's mature enough and she's done her own work, that person should be able to receive that information without judgment, and be able to understand where you're coming from. Now,
and celebrate
exactly
the intimacy that you're offering without feeling the need to either run with it or exploit it or whatever it is. I think that's very well put. That's absolutely right. And if you don't have that partner, you need to either turn them into that partner or trade them out.
And what I've seen and or at least heard, or at least I think the way it should be, is that opportunity, you're gifting that opportunity to your partner to show up for you, and you're showing up by being transparent and honest and vulnerable. And that should, in my mind, make the relationship even stronger, because now you have this trust where you can be yourself in a way, and this person will not judge you. What I see as problematic is, as men, we try to create this facade and put on a mask. It's like, oh, I'm this tough guy. Meanwhile, they've got all these emotions underneath that are impacting their ability to show up. And they expect their partner to either read their mind, or resentment starts building up because they're not doing anything about it. And that obviously leads to toxic relationships, unfortunately.
And we have women, perhaps particularly because they've had to keep their eye on men historically, cavemen and so forth. They've got a strong sixth sense. They can tell when there's a disconnect between what you're telling them. So if you're running some sort of facade, as you say, pretending to be something but acting in some other way, they know damn well, but they may not know how to express it very well, because you probably pick somebody who's as emotionally mature as you are, i.e. not as emotionally mature as you could be. So you're going to have to do the work together. You're going to have courage. But
and just to add one more point to that is, if to your point, women are able to pick up on that, and now they've lost trust in you because you're not backing up your word. You're saying something else, and then meanwhile you're doing something else. So you're being incongruent with who you are. And for a woman, that's hard for them to trust a man, because now they've lost trust in you. And then that's where the relationship kind of starts falling apart. And men often don't know what to do, and they don't really look within themselves.
Well, what
uh,
they've got to do is have the courage to say, look, I do find it hard to be straight with you. And on Friday, I said this, and I've spent some time thinking about it. And you know what I really meant was this. And I'm sorry that I didn't communicate that better to you. I hope that going forward, that also leads by example, doesn't it? So hopefully they reciprocate. So yeah, it's the courage to turn around and admit your shortcomings. And everybody loves that, right? We think that they're going to think, oh God, what an asshole. But actually they appreciate.
yeah. And if they don't, then maybe that's not the right person for you, right? So I think what happens is we try to people please for whatever reason. And I mean, you and I both know a lot of the people pleasing comes from childhood. So they'll, as we mentioned earlier, they'll put on a mask, and they're hoping for different results. And it's like, well, you're not going to get different results if you keep doing the same thing you've been doing your whole life.
Yeah. And all that trauma builds up over time. And that mask, I don't even know that I've got the mask on anymore. It's like a grimace on my face. Yeah. And I'm acting out, years of trauma. And, yeah, it's as you said, it's tough. The only thing tougher than being a parent is being somebody's partner, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously relationships are meant to be difficult, and you need both people on the same page working. At least you may not need to be going at the same pace, but as long as you're going in the same direction, I think there's value there. But yeah, and it all comes back to community and having these conversations. And if you're struggling in your relationship, or you're not sure how to express your insecurities, that's where having these deep conversations with your friends, whether it's running or being part of a men's group or whatever it is, are really, really helpful. So I encourage people to continue to do that. And William, a lot of the work you're doing is fantastic. I guess as we come to an end here, for listeners that want to get a hold of you, whether it's social media or online, what are some ways they can find your work or get in touch with you?
No, Pullen Therapy on Twitter, Dynamic Running Therapy on Instagram, dynamicrunningtherapy.com on the web. Those are some of the ways I would say. And I would just say to any of your listeners, therapy doesn't have to be incredibly scary. And if you're a man, I would suggest you probably get a male therapist, not always, but just some, and give it a go, because my job is to normalize and remind my clients that the drama that they think is so terrible inside of them is happening in the flat next door and the flat underneath. And there's nothing. I hear so many stories in here, and I've heard them all before. And there's, it's just normal stuff. How normal you feel about it is another matter.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of this podcast too, is to normalize that. So I appreciate you coming on and having this conversation with me. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure, Ferkin.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode. As always, please subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy the episodes, or leave a comment in the comment section. I always love hearing from you. Thank you again, and until next week.